Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 12th audio chat in the audio chat series on the Q News Patriot Rumble channel. I am the Q News Patriot. My name is SG Anon. I'm coming back to you today with a very good, I think, we the people discussion and a discussion about getting involved, a discussion about understanding the nature of the system that we've all been sort of living as a part of and interacting with, and maybe not even knowingly, right? And a discussion about what we do with the realizations that we're having right here, right now. How do we handle, direct, control, and channel our awakening experience in the best and most effective way possible? That's really a question that a lot of people out there are wondering. What do I do? I've got this information now. I have this new understanding. I'm aware of these forces at play. I'm aware of these deep structure powers that are in the background with their control of the purse and their control of advanced technology. But what do I do about it? What can we do about it? Well, one of the things we can do, and Mr. Shoemaker, who has taken the time to join me today, a former Missouri House representative and a very, I think, astute mind and someone who has experienced a lot of this system from the inside. That's really what we're dealing with when we talk about the Great Awakening, is trying to understand what we do and how we control and direct that and how we best benefit and apply our experiences to sort of inform the whole, right? Bring our piece of the pie to the table. And so today, we're going to talk a lot about the judiciary and how that informs this. We're going to talk a lot about the things that are on display at the public corruption level for the masses right now, for the general population of the world, and we the people to digest and absorb and comprehend and contemplate and research and then digest some more. And really the organic process that's allowing people to form perhaps new opinions for the first time in a very long time. I'm delighted to have Mr. Shoemaker on today. Mr. Shoemaker, thank you for being here.
Thank you, SG. It's kind of an honor. Thank you.
So, off air, one of the things that we were discussing, and I thought it was just a really, really fascinating conversation. I thought it was so fascinating that I wanted to revisit it while it was still fresh. We were talking just in brief about these shadow interests and these sort of hidden agendas that are fleshed out through very subtle, non-threatening messaging. A very tactful, professional, business-like approach, often applied at the governmental level, often applied at the legal level. And really what it amounts to is attempting to sway the outcome of the usage of a lever of power, right? You talked specifically about lobbying in your time as a former Missouri House representative. And you talked specifically about one of the large banks that approached you in that time and was sort of seeking to sway and influence things and that whole discussion. And that's really how this deep state apparatus, and especially in the court systems, but it's really overall how this deep state apparatus has managed to influence very important key areas all over the world in every significant governmental structure, right? If you can get an agent, if you will, an interest group, a focal group, some sort of lobbying firm, or someone with business clout or reputational clout involved in the discussion of pulling the levers of power, you have quite a bit of power now yourself. If you're capable of applying that sort of pressure and seeing that through and making promises such as reelection, promises like being sort of glorified in the local media, you'll get lots of news press coverage. We'll really take care of your reputation, right? We'll do really right by you. That's sort of the attitude that's used in this particular arena. And I thought that you could speak with your personal experience, if that was okay, to more of how that is done, because you've actually lived it, and what we the people, especially in our community levels, in our state and community levels, how we identify those sorts of overtures and how we can effectively rebuff them.
That'd be fine. I did have the experience of it once, and I probably, if I look back on it, there was probably more than one occasion, but that specifically stood out to me at that time. But it didn't really hit me that hard until when you go back in time. We're now, 20 some years from it. And you go back and you think, well, did they mean this when they said that? And I just, I would take things, I didn't take things people said literal, if that makes sense. But because in the heat of battle, you don't always believe everything someone tells you. So
Absolutely. And that's a big part of this process, right? Believing what people are saying versus what we're seeing, experiencing, sort of smelling out, if we can use the metaphorical term, in our own eyes and in our own space. The two-tier system of justice, for example, that's on display right now here in the United States with President Trump and these different indictments that we all know are just completely bogus, and they get more and more, I think, fluff, if you will, or less and less, solid as they continue to sort of go forward. The same day that we have these hearings dropping with the Devin Archer case and the Hunter Biden corruption and the Biden family corruption just in general, which I believe was orchestrated in many respects, we have the same sort of narrative seizure approach with this ridiculous indictment for I believe it was the third or fourth time now, against the former president for trivial things that he's obviously not broken the law about, right? And we know that, and that's actually been confirmed for us now in the narrative and optic space, because with carrying forward in this indictment, one of the things President Trump gained for the first time was subpoena power and the power of the judiciary discovery process, which can be very effectively applied if used correctly, regarding specifically the January 6th incident, which spawned directly again from the 2020 general election in the United States. In other words, it was the perfect forum to now legally introduce evidence to show that January 6th was a federal operation carried out by Nancy Pelosi and the former deep state government. And that all of that, of course, spawned off as an entrapment process from the 2020 election. And we know what happened in that particular election cycle. That's really what woke a lot of people, I think, out there up, that and the COVID-19 power grab. And so now we have the January 6th committee that has come out and destroyed more than 50% of their standing records as it pertained to this exact topic, this exact weaponization of justice that we've seen on display for a very long time, really, ever since the early days of the Joe Biden, the actor Biden presidency that we've all been living under. So in your opinion, as someone who has been awakening in the last year, who has a litany of life experience to draw from as it pertains to government and power and how these sorts of things are always fleshed out, where the court system plays into all of that, what are you seeing as someone that we could say is, coming new to the awakening table and bringing a lot of, I think, high caliber ammunition?
Well, it's kind of like when I was in the Air Force, and I can remember when I was opening up RVs I probably shouldn't say that, but basically I was running a business and we were opening up the business, and the planes hit the towers and went, and then all of a sudden, hours later, they coming down. And I'm thinking to myself back then, well, that shouldn't have brought those towers down. They're all made out of steel and concrete. Jet fuel shouldn't have done that. And not knowing anything, you go back and you think, well, maybe there's something I don't understand. But then as time has gone on, you start seeing bits and pieces of actual reality, real videos. And I'm not a demolition expert by any means, and I'm not a weapons man. But when you see flashes of light in the video, all of a sudden you think, was this a planned demolition? And you think, well, surely not. I can't believe that our government would have done that or even allowed terrorists to do that. Does that make sense? And you start questioning things. And then, I don't know, it just seems like the pieces just kept falling in place about what our government's been doing. And especially the last couple of years, when you see the bad people getting away with breaking windows, stealing, and they're not put in jail, which I think is a reason why, because they want chaos. They want the good people to go to jail. They want to give the bad people the weapons so they can overtake us. And I think that's me thinking. I'm not speaking for anyone else. But from what I am seeing, this is what I think our government is trying to do, or the bad part of our government. I believe that they're trying to do exactly what they did to the czar, and they create chaos. They let the murderers and the people go, which they have done. They don't prosecute the bad people. They prosecute the good people. They put the good people in jail, take their weapons from the good people, let the weapons go to the bad people, They say the things that are uh, against biblical principles, and they allow abominations to God. When I was raised, that was a no-no. And my wife and I were both raised to do the right thing, even though it hurts, and say you're sorry if you do something wrong to somebody. But if you take a look at what's going on now, San Francisco and Chicago, boarded up walls, people on the streets, they want that to make everyone sick, abundant on government, relying on government so they can control you and kill you. That's what I see, and that's what I feel.
And my friend, I think that that is perhaps one of the better summaries and the better summations of the circumstances that are transpiring out there in the world and have been transpiring publicly, certainly for the last 3 to 3.5 years, but I believe in many cases for several decades in the background for a long time. And that ties back to the control of, I think, the courts and the information and how those two dovetail together. You were talking earlier about the constitutional rights and how these things are being ignored, but they're really sort of based on just basic manners. They're based on basic, simple rural principles, I think, in many respects that we, the people everywhere in all nations, find ourselves adhering to because they bring us, I think, more closely aligned with God and our Creator. I think they bring us more closely aligned with who we really, really are. And so it feels good to operate in that capacity. And this infestation that we have witnessed at all different levels of government and power, precisely through the means that you talked about earlier, and many other ways too, with blackmail and invitations to certain parties where there's cameras, and all of a sudden you're here with a very young child, and this child happens to be naked in front of a lot of other adults, and so now we've got this very bad looking situation which controls a lot of people, I think, in governments everywhere um, who may be more sort of cowardly, but not necessarily against we the people. They're just more, they're going to take the side of self-preservation, right? They'll be on their side. And that's part of I think the process that we've all lived through in these last few years is ascertaining who's really on our side, right? We've learned even that the court systems in some regards are not on our side. I have a personal contact in the court systems out there in the United States of America right now who is an incarcerated individual, and the conditions that go on within the U.S. prison systems are worse than third world. They're very much like a war camp from the days of old. We're talking about consumption of food that is actually marked not for human consumption. We're talking about free labor. There was an individual in the system recently, within recent months, who had a golf ball sized hernia. The hernia was diagnosed, but they chose to wait for treatment rather than treat the hernia at that time with a surgical correction, and the hernia became softball sized. And so it's a much more involved, much more dangerous operation. But the state who funds the Department of Correctional System, which is a component of the legal system and the judiciary here in the United States, they don't wish to pay for those sorts of things because it's a greed-based system, right? It's an extortion-based system at the end of the day. And so we, the people, first of all, by becoming aware of our system, we're able, I think, to change it. We're able to go to our local courthouse and petition for redress of grievance. We're able to go to our city public hearings and public calls and things that the zoning commission may put out or the planning commission may put out. We're able to run for office locally if you feel pulled in that regard, right? If you have a good basis and a good standing in your community and you feel pulled to roll in that direction, or perhaps you feel pulled to support someone who has chosen to go in that direction as an America First, we the people candidate. That is how I think we take this system back, right? They can cheat a lot. They absolutely have proven that. They cheated optically. They cheated President Trump out of a second presidency, an entire second term, right? And the country is being completely wrecked as a result of the cooperation of a very entrenched, very real infestation and Leviathan that we have in the form of a deep state controlled apparatus in our government. But as we
Well,
get more involved, we have the ability, I think, to stand up against this power structure and frighten them into mistakes.
okay. Yeah,
What's on that, my friend?
I hope that's what's happening. But I can also remember here locally when President Obama had run for a second term, I just couldn't believe even my local county would vote for him. And then it was probably years later that I was talking to a sheriff deputy that quit, that they were actually investigating ballots that had come to the county and that it came from a different city miles from us, but they couldn't prove where it came from. And every one of them voted for Mr. Obama. And to me, I'm thinking, well, that just proves that they were cheating. But did I know it was on a statewide basis? I suspicioned it, but you can't prove anything like that back then. So I know the cheating is just getting worse and worse and worse.
Well, that leads me right into my next question. And I think that you offer a very good perspective that could be very helpful with this question, because I asked this question of a lot of different folks, and it's really sort of based on worldly wisdom and experience. As we are watching what's happening, as we're experiencing essentially what amounts to a hostile takeover of the United States government and a suspension of we the people's voice and vote and the ability to affect change, even at our local community level. For example, I can assure you that in my area, there is an elected representative within the county government who I can't name or identify, who is 100% cheating her way back into office. And so as we look at these sorts of things and we're realizing these things right in our communities, right in our faces, we have to look to our children. I have a 5-year-old. Eventually, he'll be pulling the levers of power and making decisions. Eventually, he'll have a vote and a say here in this country, whatever that looks like when he's of age. Eventually, he'll be making decisions for his local community, wherever he chooses to lay those roots down, that will affect the direction of that community and may affect the direction of any grandchildren that I should be fortunate enough to have. And so as we go through this process, as someone who has experienced this, has lived a lot of life, and even had suspicions back about 9/11 from what you said earlier, which I think is incredibly intuitive. And then to fast forward now to what is happening in the world. When we look at the younger generation, particularly the ones who are too young to have an opinion or maybe forming an opinion, in that pre-adolescent and very early adolescent stage, how do we guide them so that we can avoid the continuation of public corruption at the levels that are on display everywhere?
Well, personally, I believe you've got to, and I failed at this. To be honest, I was too busy building a business, too busy trying to make a living, try to get money to educate my children. But what we got to do is bring them back to the principles of God and show them right from wrong, show them what we think is going on, give them a little bit of dose every day about why you feel that way. I've started doing that with my children at a little bit at a time, but I didn't want to scare them to the point of, I tell you what, these young adults have a lot of pressure now. And as what I feel is that we're being poisoned more and more and faster. It's going to be harder and harder for them to think clearly, if that makes sense, because they're being more poisoned every day. And I just hope that I can influence for them to discern, make the right decisions, and don't believe everything that everyone says, but start watching where the money goes. Don't listen to the words, but watch the person's action. If they say one thing but do another, that's a red flag. If they continue to do it, you really know where that person's at. It's not really what anybody says, it's what they do.
I think that's wisdom for the ages. It's always about action. It's always about, I mean, even Jesus said, "Ye shall know the tree by the fruit it bears." And so the action itself sort of is the defining characteristic. And we've gotten away from that in many regards. And we've tried to intellectualize the discussion, and we've tried to rationalize certain things that I think are on their faces to, especially to young children, for as an example, and to all of the older generations, are utterly ridiculous. And it's sort of insane that we should have to have the conversation itself. It should be sort of an understood. And I think we have to come back to that. And what you highlighted a moment ago about teaching them, to walk in a godly way, I think that, that's exactly what all of we, the people everywhere, really seek to do at that deep life level anyway, right? There's a purpose. We're here for a purpose. We're here to glorify God and to help, I think, better this world. This is just my own personal opinion. And we can't do that unless we're walking in principles that are sort of based in love and light and forgiveness, and in the reverence of the fact that we're made in the image and likeness of a very, very powerful being, and we should respect that. And we should respect the sort of dynamic that we get to enjoy and further and expand and bring our own personal, individual tree, if we will, and plant that in the root of what this earth has become. And I think that's a big portion of what's happening here at a grander level, if I may, is just a very long overdue rebalancing and a return to a way of life that is not so much necessarily simple, but is certainly much more closely aligned with our true nature and who we really are, right? We've forgotten who we are because they've never really taught us. And they've attempted to influence even our pulpits in many regards and try to get those messages skewed and obfuscated. And we need to look no further than all of the different responses to the vaccination agenda and how that happened both for and against from that very sector and that very area. So I do have one last question for you, Mr. Shoemaker, and then I won't take up any more of your time. I really very much appreciate you spending some time with me today and for being willing to come and do something like this. But the advice is for essentially that mid 20s to we'll say 25 to 40-year-old generation, that group of individuals who may be looking or eyeing a run for some sort of public office or some sort of influential position in their area for the first time. What would you tell them to do? What would you tell them to not do? And what would you change looking back if you were able to?
Well, first, when you become into those positions, don't fall for everyone saying they want to be your friend or they're trying to be your friend. They are not your friend. The only reason they're your friend is because they think you have power. Number one. Number two, if you don't go the way they want you to go, be prepared for a lot of hate because you will receive it. You will have what you think is your best friends or were your friends or not your friends no more. Then you will also gain friends that you didn't think were around at the time, because if you're a godly person, the ones that follow Satan will do everything in their power to ruin you. That is a fact. I could tell you stories, but I don't want to go into those stories. But I did lose a lot of what I thought were childhood friends. And then I gained a lot of friends from my positions. I tried to do the right thing. And I can remember being in my office looking out over outside, and I would ask God for the right answer. Everything that I did, I tried to not hurt someone, but everything you do, you can hurt somebody's livelihood and not mean to. So try to make a very discerning and ask for guidance. The other thing too is anybody that's talking to you, trying to influence you, always ask them who this hurts, because that's what I found out that I would do. They would come to my office. I'd say, so who does this legislation hurt? And they'll say, well, someone would come out and say, well, the other side will have this issue. So why should I hurt these people over you? That doesn't make sense to me. For like when a person wants to raise taxes on this group of people, but they don't want their taxes raised, I would always say, well, if you don't want your taxes raised, why should I raise someone else's tax so you can have these funds? And that usually shut them down, if that makes sense. But always watch your back. Always investigate what they say to make sure what they say is true, and then make a decision and live with the decision that you made. And I would say it's probably the best that I can say.
I don't think you can say it any better. That's really good advice. And at the end of the day, it's boiled down to that, how you just close that off. Seek the guidance, seek ye first the kingdom, right? Seek the higher wisdom, I think, for lack of a better term, that is available to you, right? We're all connected to this wonderful almighty that we call God. We're all connected to Jesus. We're all connected to this incredible power, and it's available to us, but we have to be in a place where we're willing and humble, I think, and contrite enough in many regards to receive that. And so I guess that's how I'd like to end our chat today, if that's all right, Mr. Shoemaker, is coming back to a better way of doing things in the world. We've talked a little bit today about the courts. We've talked about the government. We've talked about the infestation that we call the deep state. We've talked about the weaponized systems and all of these things that are on full display. But at the end of the day, we, the people, we have to apply the awareness. We have to move. We have to move into some sort of action. And I think that we have a point of choice before we move into action where we can sort of give it up to God and see what plans he wants to unfold for us and how our path may walk and turn out for us. And I think in many regards, that in and of itself is another way of saying to seek that kingdom first, to go back to that prayer closet, back to that spirit-filled place, and try to get in touch with what really speaks to you and what really resonates with you and what really moves you. And that, I think, is the advice we could give to everyone out there, every patriot everywhere. As you move into action, as you hear broadcasts like this, if you're coming around maybe for the first time recently, or maybe you've been awake for a really long time, and maybe you've witnessed things for such a long time that you're a bit cynical and jaded, and you're having a hard time with these sorts of things, moving into some sort of inspired action, I think, is one of the key components of taking back our world and creating a world that's based on God and based around godly principles, like it was always supposed to be. Nature in this world, we were made the regents and the princes of this kingdom that was created here. We can look at Genesis and see that clearly. And so I think it's worth noting that as we go through this process, that has to be a major, major component of taking things back. And so, Mr. Shoemaker, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. If anyone were to reach out to the Q News Patriot wishing to connect or correspond about possible Patriot avenues or conduits for action, would it be permissible for me to share your information privately?
Yes, you can do that.
I appreciate it, sir. Everyone, I hope you very much enjoyed this audio chat today. It's been a pleasure and a privilege. Again, I do these audio chats to connect we the people patriots everywhere and to sort of bridge that digital landscape where we can truly feel that we are not alone and that we have aid and there is comfort in the war, if we can call it that. And I appreciate you listening so far into this, and I hope everyone out there has a beautiful day. This is SG Anon. We'll be back with you again soon. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.